Well, it's looking more and more likely that we're going to see attacks on the Iranian regime coming very soon. We don't know exactly when it's going to be. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this is that it's starting to get close to Purim, to the Jewish holiday of Purim, which, of course, commemorates the victory over the genocidal Persian decree to wipe out all the Jews. Does death to Israel sound kind of familiar? It's kind of getting interesting the way things are converging at this moment. But what I'd like to do is just take a look at the indications that things are getting much more imminent. But also, first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a short video that I just saw of former CENTCOM commander Bob, what's his name here? Bob Harward. So former CENTCOM commander Bob Harward talking about what a potential U.S. strike would look like. And let's just watch the clip, and then I'll share my thoughts. Here we go.
Number one, the missiles. That's really their best ability to project power. Number two, then, the protection of the Straits of Hormuz, their ability to mine the waterways, and that the naval forces that can put at risk international shipping, bringing and taking oil. So those would be my two priorities. And then after that, I'd focus on those elements that really have oppressed the people of Iran, the IRGC, where their facilities, their barracks, their head command and control. Those would be almost the pecking order of my priorities.
Is this all simultaneous, or this would be over a number of weeks?
Well, it depends on how they respond. One of the things that's really happened in our military, our capacity is unprecedented. So the amount of ordnance we can deliver real time and over a short period of time is massive.
Can military power alone topple this regime?
Well, military power in support of the Iranian people. Again, this has to be about the internal dynamics of Iran. And as we've seen, they've had enough. And this regime murdered more people in a matter of weeks than we lost in the Iraqi-Irani war over 15 years in those wars. So again, it has to be in support of the people. And they've shown the capacity, they've shown the desire, they've been murdered. I think that's, if these strikes and our military actions enable and support that transition through the people, then it's effective.
Do you believe these military strikes are imminent?
I'd say they're more likely than not. And again, it's driven by two things. I'd say the negotiation, what comes out of the negotiation. I would also say how well we understand the impact of the internal. I think both those dimensions are being assessed at the moment, and that will define if and when we go. But I sense it's more a matter of when, not if.
Okay, so let's unpack what we just saw there. I think, one of the issues that we've been talking about a lot in these updates and in the whole lead up to potential strikes on Iran has been the issue of how do you actually bring down the regime? Because as much as people are like, oh, we need to end the regime, we need to attack, I've been pretty open about the fact that I'm not sure how one necessarily leads to the other, because you can't bomb the regime out of existence. But here he really lays out what an American attack would look like. And notice what he said. He talked about three goals. Goal number one, meaning the three priorities, hitting the ballistic missile capabilities, because, as he put it, that's Iran's best ability to project power is the ballistic missiles, right? Because they don't have a nuclear program that was devastated in the 12-day war. There's pieces of it left, and of course the negotiations. If in the media, everyone's saying that the negotiations are focusing on that, the enriched uranium. What do you do with that? And are you going to be committing not to have nuclear weapons and blah blah blah? But the truth is, the biggest threat that Iran poses is its ballistic missiles. The ballistic missile threat is formidable, and it's actually gotten stronger since the 12-day war. So he puts as priority number one, taking out the ballistic missile threat. And the ballistic missile threat is really the only threat to anyone else in the region, whether it's American assets or Israel. It's the ballistic missiles that are the big issue. There's also been reports that the Iranians are moving some of their equipment and some of their ballistic missiles and other things, personnel, towards the Iraqi border, which would put them closer to striking distance to Israel through Iraq, through Syria, in that direction. But it's the ballistic missiles that are really the big threat. So this former CENTCOM commander says the first thing we got to hit is the ballistic missiles. The second thing is the possible mining of the Straits of Hormuz. Let me explain that. The Straits of Hormuz are a critical shipping lane that Iran has the ability to close. During the 12-day war, they tried to close the Straits of Hormuz. They actually briefly closed the Straits of Hormuz, and the Chinese Communist Party, Iran's alleged ally, forced them to reopen them. Okay, and they the Iranians just closed them briefly the other day to conduct a joint naval drill with the Russians. So they're projecting power, they're flexing their muscles, basically reminding everyone that they have the ability to close the Straits of Hormuz. So number 2 on his list of priorities is making sure that the Straits of Hormuz, any dangers posed by the Iranians, by the IRGC in the Straits of Hormuz are neutralized. And then he said number 3 on the priority list is hitting regime targets. And he specifically mentioned the headquarters of the IRGC, the various places where they have their personnel and their leadership. And that would create the conditions that would make it easier for the Iranian people to support the Iranian people in the potential downfall of the regime. Now, that's the best case scenario I've heard for how the regime falls. But remember, even in that scenario, you cannot bomb the regime out of existence. You can only create conditions that can help the regime fall. Now, let's take a look at some other things that are going on here. The Jordanians, one of the impacts of this is that the Arab partners, the Muslim partners, or not partners, but neighbors in the region, are all getting really, really skittish. So we already saw a few weeks ago where the Saudis and the Qataris, who both have significant American bases in their territory, declared unequivocally that the United States cannot use their territory to launch attacks. The Jordanians have made noises about the same thing, and they're kind of getting stuck because there have been a lot of reports of large amounts of American weaponry, of American planes, and attack choppers, attack helicopters being flown into Jordan. So let's take a look here. We have this headline in Ynet. Don't want to be part of the storm. Jordan fears becoming battleground amid U.S.-Iran tensions. Satellite images show more than 60 U.S. strike aircraft at the Muwafaq al-Salti airbase, as Amman reiterates it will not allow its territory or airspace to be used for attacks, despite its deepening security ties with Washington. So this is getting really interesting. Okay, so Jordan is approaching a possible escalation with Iran as a country at the heart of the storm, but one that does not want to be a part of it, a Jordanian source said Saturday, hours after satellite images showed dozens of U.S. fighter jets at Muwafaq al-Salti airbase in the kingdom. So this is a big U.S. airbase in Jordan. Quote, officially, Amman confirms it will not allow the use of its territory for any attack in a clear attempt to establish neutrality and keep the country away from the line of fire. Now, this is really interesting because the Qataris and the Saudis, when they said weeks ago that they would not allow, they said they would not allow the U.S. to use their bases. We haven't seen a buildup in U.S. bases in those territories. Jordan also said this, but the U.S. is building up their equipment there. Okay, the comments came after the New York Times published satellite images of the airbase located about 100 kilometers east of Amman. The images taken by an Airbus satellite showed more than 60 strike aircraft, including F-35 stealth jets, as well as 68 cargo planes that have arrived since Sunday. So just this week, 60 cargo planes. And we're talking about F-35s. Additional fighter jets were seen parked under protective shelters. The Times described the base as becoming a key hub in U.S. preparations for an attack. Public opinion in Jordan is, of course, against the Jordanians being involved. And this is a very sensitive issue. Jordan is watching the situation carefully. Earlier this month, Jordan's foreign ministry and foreign minister Foreign Ministry said Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi spoke with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi. They're trying to keep, relations as peaceful as possible there. Safadi also said Jordan will not be a battlefield for any regional conflict or a launching point for any military action against Iran. Okay. They will not anyone use their airspace. They're not going to let anyone use their airspace. And they made similar statements in June 2025. Now, in June 2025, for the 12-day war, Israel did not use Jordanian airspace. The route that the Israeli fighter jets flew to carry out all their sorties attacking Iran was up into Syria from Israel and then across Iraq into Iran. They avoided Jordanian airspace at the time. It was also interesting the way the Iraqis reacted, because during the entire 12-day war, the Iraqis didn't say anything. And then only after, they didn't complain even once. But then after the war was over, after the 12-day war, they registered a complaint with the UN against the Israelis for using their airspace, which I thought was just comical, because they didn't complain the whole 12-day war, but they didn't want to lose face to their other Arab countries. So after the war was over, they complained about it. Now, here's an interesting comment towards the end of this article. Despite these statements, the United States maintains access to several military bases in Jordan from which it can operate. Quote, there appears to be a contradiction, but we should recall the Second Gulf War in 2003, said Professor Ronen Yitzchak, head of Middle East Studies at Western Galilee Academic College and a researcher at Tel Aviv University's Dayan Center. Quote, during the U.S. war against Iraq, this is in 2003, Jordan served as a central staging ground. The United States used bases and deployed Patriot systems inside Jordan. Yitzchak said Jordan likely plays a significant role despite official declarations. Quote, in the end, there is a system of interests and strategic considerations, including improving relations with the United States, increasing security assistance, integration into diplomatic frameworks, and other benefits Jordan can expect, as happened after 2003. He noted that while the United States has broad access to Jordanian bases, the primary buildup appears concentrated at Muwafaq al-Salti. Okay, meanwhile, the National Interest reported in recent days that military ties between Jordan and the United States have strengthened over the past year. Okay, they've been deepening their strategic partnership. Okay, now let me give you my take on what this all means. Okay, Jordan is different than the Qataris and the Saudis with regard to Iran. Okay, the Jordanian government, the king of Jordan, Abdullah, they actually want good relations with the West. They already have a peace deal with Israel. They don't want to be in anyone's crosshairs. They're not trying to pressure the Americans. That's Jordan. And they've been deepening the ties with the Americans. They get a lot of aid from the United States, right? Like Qatar and Saudi Arabia don't get aid from the United States. There's bases there, but they don't get aid. Jordan is really in the U.S. orbit. Now, when the Saudis and the Qataris say you can't use our bases, my take is that America is going to honor that, because the Saudis and the Qataris actually don't want the Iranian regime to fall. The Iranian regime falls, it's devastating to them. I've explained this in a few previous videos. The Saudis are the big losers in the region, other than the mullahs in Iran themselves, but they're the big losers in the region if the Iranian regime falls. If the Iranian regime falls and Iran becomes a pro-Western state, because of the landmass and the population size and the fact that they're a major oil-producing nation, and they'd be aligned with the West, where they're located in terms of global trade routes, in terms of regional security, they render the Saudi Arabian kingdom basically irrelevant, or far less relevant, not much of a strategic asset. Right now, the Saudis are this huge strategic asset, and that's why the United States and the West are constantly courting them, and they get to kind of lure them in and play both sides. And that's why the Saudis are always switching sides, because they're a major strategic asset. Everyone wants the Saudis on their side because Iran is such a pariah. Iran ceases to be a pariah, and suddenly the land corridor across the region can run through Iran, and you have an oil-producing nation that's pro-Western. Saudi Arabia is not so important anymore. So they don't want the regime to fall. They want the regime to remain in power. They're happy with it being weak. They've never gotten along with them that well, but they don't want the regime to fall. Qataris also don't want the regime to fall. The Qataris don't gain from the Iranian regime falling. They have a kind of quiet working relationship with them when it comes to Islamism and terrorism across the region. They don't want the regime to fall either. But the Jordanians probably do want the regime to fall. They'd probably benefit from a more Western-aligned Middle East. And therefore, what I believe is happening here is that the Jordanians are saying, we don't want you to use our space. We are against this. We are against this. We are against this, because they have to say that to save face, because all the regional actors who have American bases are all saying that, and they can't appear to be cooperating with the Americans. So they're saying, we don't want to use our space. We don't want you to use our space. But if there's confidence by the Jordanians that the Americans will be successful in bringing down the Iranian regime or delivering it just a mortal blow, and also important, neutralizing Iran's capabilities to retaliate against American assets in the region, which is what they'd be afraid of, meaning ballistic missiles getting launched at them, then if they're confident that they're actually safe from consequences when an attack actually happens, they probably don't mind their territory being used to bring down the Iranian regime. Because if the Iranian regime is weakened or actually falls, especially if it actually falls, then they really have nothing to worry about. Who's going to retaliate against them? Who's going to punish them for having allowed the Americans to use their territory? So they're messaging that they don't want the Americans to use their territory, but they're really just going to acquiesce. They can't say no to the Americans. The Americans have a leverage over them that they don't have over Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So for all these reasons that I've just laid out, I believe that the Jordanians are just saying that they don't want the United States using their territory, but they actually are happy to have their territory be used. Now, at the same time, look at this. This relates to what we just said, and this is in Middle East Monitor, and which is a kind of pro-Arab site. U.S. evacuates hundreds of troops from Qatar, Bahrain amid Iran tensions. This is from yesterday. Okay, so look at this. Hundreds of U.S. troops have been pulled out of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the New York Times reported Friday. So this is just a couple days ago. After all these weeks, the U.S. troops have remained there. They've pulled them out of Qatar, citing anonymous Pentagon sources. The report also said forces have been evacuated from Bahrain, where the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is based. American forces remain stationed at bases in Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. The withdrawal is being interpreted as a precautionary measure amid rising tensions about a possible U.S. attack on Iran, with Tehran expected to respond by striking American forces in the region. CENTCOM, which covers Iran and much of the surrounding region, did not respond to a request for comment. And in a letter to the UN Secretary General, the head of Iran's mission to the UN said that all bases, facilities, and assets of the hostile force in the region would be legitimate targets, and the U.S. would bear full responsibility. And so they're evacuating Al Udeid. Al Udeid is the U.S.'s biggest base in the Middle East with 10,000 troops, and they're starting to evacuate them. And meanwhile, on another front, this update is all about how everyone's preparing for the strikes in Iran, the potential strikes. Israeli strikes kill at least 10 in Lebanon, officials say. So here, what Israel's been doing to prepare for potential strikes against Iran is neutralizing Hezbollah, because Hezbollah, the proxy of Iran, who sat it out during the 12-day war, has been told in no uncertain terms by their bosses in Tehran that they ain't sitting this one out. If Naim Qassem, the head of Hezbollah, sits this one out too, if the last thing he wants, then he's dead either way. If the regime falls, he's dead, because Hezbollah has no lifeline without the Iranian regime. And if the regime survives and he didn't help, then he's dead too. So he's stuck. But meanwhile, the Israelis are neutralizing them. Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 10 people in eastern Lebanon. Israel's military said it targeted sites belonging to Hezbollah, a Shia Muslim militia and political party in the Bekaa Valley. Great. Now, and Hezbollah confirmed it as well. In a statement, the Israeli military said it had struck what it described as Hezbollah's command centers and that the group systematically embeds its assets within the civilian population. In a separate statement on Saturday, the Israeli military said it had eliminated several terrorists of Hezbollah's missile array in 3 different command centers recently identified as operating to accelerate the organization's readiness and force buildup processes while planning fire attacks towards Israel. Okay. And then there's, of course, the whole issue of the fact that Hezbollah is supposed to be disarmed and they refuse to. Lebanese Prime Minister Naif Salam recently said the situation had become a one-sided war of attrition, blaming the Israelis, basically. And so that is where things stand. So let's just sum up what we have here. We saw former CENTCOM commander giving us a sense of what an American strike would look like: neutralize the ballistic missiles, deal with the Straits of Hormuz so that the Navy can operate freely, and start hitting regime targets to facilitate the weakening of the regime such that, number one, they don't have the ability to strike American assets, go for the ballistic missiles first, and also create the conditions where the regime can fall. And meanwhile, we have the Jordanians kind of playing this game. We see a massive buildup in Jordan while retreat happening from Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And the Jordanians saying, don't use our space, don't use our space. I don't believe them. And finally, we have what Israel is doing to prepare by neutralizing Hezbollah in Lebanon. So that's where things stand right now. I believe that attacks are imminent. So a lot of people do, but we do not know. As I've said over and over again, Trump has a doctrine of unpredictability, and he seems to be sticking to it. All right, that's it for now. Please make sure to check out all the good content we're putting up at Israel 365. We're just finishing up in Nashville, Tennessee, where we've been busy all week at the National Religious Broadcasters. And there's a lot of great content from that up on the Israel 365 News YouTube channel. So keep watching and keep sharing and telling people about this channel. Thank you so much for helping us grow the channel. God bless.